Welcome to TeamCovenant.com's tutorial video for Monsterpocalypse. We hope that at the end of this video you know the basics of the game enough to play. And that said, we realize that there's a lot of tactics, strategy, nuances. It's a very brilliant game in that respect, so we can't cover everything in this video. We just want to give you the very, very basics so that if you're a brand new player, you can watch this video and get some insight into how these rules work, how everything looks whenever it's being played, and that way you'll have a better understanding of the game going in. Now we'll start by just outlining all of the components involved in Monsterpocalypse. These are all the things you're going to see while you're playing a game. This is a monster, and it's going to be the way that you win Monsterpocalypse. It's a game of two big monsters battling one another, and if your monster dies first, you lose, and if you kill your opponent's monster, then you win. You'll notice on the bottom of the piece it says type monster, and it's pretty easy to recognize what a monster is. It takes up 4 squares, and it looks like a monster. Every monster will be coming in 2 forms when you play the game. This, you notice, is different than this form. This is your alpha form, and this will be your hyper form. You'll notice it says ultra here, and you also notice on the bottom it says ultra, so you can easily identify it. It also is translucent, which makes it pretty obvious. So this is your monster in the 2 forms, and these are units. Units in Monsterpocalypse are what's going to support your main monster in defeating your enemy. They can be used for all sorts of things, various tasks and various ways of helping out your monster. So this is what a unit looks like. They're smaller, they take up 1 square. And you notice on the bottom it says type grunt unit. There are actually 2 types of units, grunt and elite, and actually shadow, but we'll cover that later. So you just need to know that this is a unit. And then over here is a structure. This is particularly a building. You'll notice on the bottom it says apartment building and type building. These also take up 4 squares, and they are going to be littering the map in Monsterpocalypse, and you can utilize them for various tasks, various things that they help with. They're going to also be a key to victory in your game. This is a rebel tile. You'll notice that it has 2 sides. This is the rebel side, and this is the hazard side. We'll cover that later. And there's 3 dice here, and these are the currency of Monsterpocalypse, particularly the white action die. This is what you're going to spend to do the basic take the basic actions in the game. So anytime you want to move, whenever you need to make an attack, things like this, you're going to use your action die. You notice that it has 3 misses, 2 strikes, and 1 super strike. That'll be important later whenever you're figuring out an attack. The boost die is a supplementary dice that you might gain if your monster is particularly good at doing something, and you will just add these to certain rolls to boost the percentage of that roll being a success. And the boost die is a bit better than an A die because it only has 2 misses and 3 strikes and 1 super strike. So it's a better hit percentage on that die. And the best die of all is the power die. And this is what's going to drive your monster's power attacks. It's what's going to make your monster do damage and really, really toss the other monster around the map. Your power die you gain in a lot of different ways. We'll go over that later. But it's got 4 hits, 1 super strike, and 1 miss. So this is the best dice of all as far as odds are concerned. These 3 dice you're going to be manipulating between your different pools and basically using them to take actions and do various things in the game. This is a health tracker. It's to keep track of your monster's health. Pretty self-explanatory. There's numbers, and they will correspond to the amount of health that your monster has. This is a reference sheet, which you probably have, and if you don't, you might think of getting one. They come in the starters, and they basically just give you a rundown of the basics, the basic steps, and all of the abilities of your monsters and your units. So these are very handy. Keep them in mind. And then also what you're looking at here is the map. This is the battle map. And you'll notice here there's a nice grid of squares which your units and your monsters are going to move around on. There's various things on this map that we'll explain later. And then over here on the side is where all of your reserves and your dice are going to be kept. And we'll cover that later as well. So these are the basic components, Monsterpocalypse. And let's move on to setting up the map and getting a game started. Alright, so we're going to play a game. And I'm lucky enough to have a friend here. His name is Dylan. And he's joining me for this game. He's going to be my opponent. I'm going to clear the board here of all the things I was showing you. The first thing we want to do whenever we're playing a game is see who's going to go first. So the way we do that is you take 5 of these action dice, the white dice, and Dylan will do the same, and we'll roll them, and whoever gets the most strikes will be the first player to act. Alright, you'll see here, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 strikes, and Dylan has 1. This is a good sign. So I will be the active player. And what this means is, since Dylan lost the roll, he gets to choose which map we're going to play on. This can be very significant later whenever you're getting into strategies. There's a lot of different maps that utilize various strategies and tactics that can really push the game one way or the other. So for now, Dylan will choose a map.
I'd like to play on this map.
And Dylan would like to play on this map. Excellent. So I'm the first acting player. What you start with is structures. You want to build this map up. Now for the sake of ease of viewing and for just explanation for this video, we're only going to use 4 structures apiece. Normally you would have a map full of structures. You can bring 12 structures to a battle. So this entire map would be full of buildings and we'd be colliding into them, and it's great. But for explanation purposes, we're just going to stick to 4 apiece. So I am going to place my first structure. Now you'll notice on this map that there's green squares, there's yellow squares. Green squares must be filled up with structures before you place any structure on a yellow square. So our options at the very beginning, my first placement, I have 6 options here. These 6 green squares in the middle of the map. I'll take my structure and I will place it wherever I choose. Now I can place it on any green square that I want. So I want to place it here. That's my first structure placement, and then Dylan will place a structure. And we'll go back and forth until all of our structures are placed. Alright. And here. Notice we have to stay on the green squares. We got 1 more green square left. Not a whole lot of thinking involved. Alright, the green squares are filled, and I have 1 structure left to place. Now you see all of these yellow squares here, all around the map. I can place this structure anywhere on those yellow squares, even right in my opponent's face. And while this probably wouldn't be the best move, for the sake of this demo, I'm going to place a structure right there. Utilizing these yellow squares in the correct way is one of the main things to learn about Monsterpocalypse, because you really want the right buildings in the right places. And Dylan will place Lady Liberty over there on his right. So we've got all of our structures placed. The map is technically set up enough to where we can start the game. And what we're going to do is, first of all, place our alpha monster, the alpha form of our monster, on one of these 2 squares. You notice that Dylan's squares are red, the dashed squares, and mine are the blue dashed squares. I have 2 options for my monster. He has 2 options for his monster. I'm the acting player. I'll place my monster there. Dylan?
I will place mine there.
Alright, our monsters are on the board, our structures are on the board. Now we need to take the hyper form of our monster and place it over here in the rectangle that's the monster reserves. This guy's going to come into play later on, but not yet. So our hyper form is in our monster reserves, our alpha form is on the map. Now we have this unit reserves over here. Let me talk to you a little bit about units. Units come in basically 2 types. We have grunt units and we have elite units. Grunt units, you'll notice, have black lettering and on the bottom say grunt unit. So this is a grunt scorcher. Here we have the same model, same scorcher, but red lettering, a bit different paint on the miniature, and on the bottom it says Elite Unit. These are the two types, grunts and elites. Your grunts are going to be your main force, and your elites are going to be like your commanders. They all grant leadership, which is an ability we can expand on later, but it's going to help out your grunt units to do more damage. So these elite units are nice to have. Now notice that if you just bought a starter set, there will be no elite units. So that's something you can look forward to later as you expand your army. One thing else we need to mention is you can have a total of 15 units in your unit reserves. So no more than 15 units, and of those 15, you can only have 5 of one type of unit and 5 elite units total. So if I have 5 grunt scorchers, I'm fine. If I have 6 grunt scorchers, that's an illegal army. I can have a max of 5 grunts and then a max of 5 elites of any kind of unit. So I can't have 5 elite scorchers and 1 elite of anything else. I can't have 2 elite scorchers and 4 elite of something else. Only 5 elite units. Doesn't matter what type of elite they are, only 5. So when you're constructing your army, keep that in mind. 15 total units, 5 max of a grunt unit, and 5 max of any elite unit. And so let's set up our unit reserves now. And we'll move in various units. You'll see there's all sorts of different kinds of units granting various abilities that do various things. And we'll just set them up here. You'll also notice that the rectangle is just big enough to fit 15 units in it. Alright, and our unit reserves are set. Now you'll notice there's these fields down here right under your unit reserves. And this is going to be your dice well and your unit pool. The dice well, you'll notice, has the power die and boost die symbol on it. And then the unit pool has a tank and an action die on it. So, easy enough. We're going to put all 10 of our action die in the unit pool, which is the bottom right corner. At the beginning of the game, your action dice always start in your unit pool. And then our power die and our boost die are going to go in the dice well. And they're just going to hang out here. They can't do anything for us right now. They're just in our reserves to be utilized later. There. So we're set up here. We don't bother with the left side of the board. We'll worry about that later. We've got our monster in our monster reserves. We've got 15 units in our unit reserves. We've got our dice well filled with power dice and boost dice, and we've got our unit pool filled with 10 action dice. Once this is accomplished, we can start playing the game, and that's what we're going to do. Alright, before we take any activations, we want to be sure to have our health trackers set so that we can keep track of our monster's health. Now you'll notice that on both forms of your monster, in the bottom left corner, there's a heart. That heart is going to signify the health value of that monster. Now my Zorog here, in the alpha form, has a 6 in the heart, and then my hyper form has a 7 in the heart. So my alpha health, on the very top, I will set to 6, and my hyper health, the bottom, I'll set to 7. And this is how I'm going to keep track of my monster taking damage. So be sure to have this set before the game starts, and be sure to keep up with it throughout the game so that you know the appropriate health of your monster at any time. Now, whenever I'm taking an activation, I have two options. I can take a unit activation, in which I deploy and move and use units, or I can take a monster activation, in which I move and attack with my monster. Now, in order to take an activation, you have to have at least one action die in the appropriate pool. So, you'll notice I was talking about my unit pool earlier. I have all 10 action die in my unit pool. My monster pool over here, I have 0 action die. The way that Monsterpocalypse works in its currency, the way that the game is played, is the action die are going to go from unit pool to monster pool and back from monster pool to unit pool. So they're always going to be oscillating between these two pools. And that's something just to keep in mind as we're going along. And since I have 10 action die in my unit pool and 0 action die in my monster pool, I'm going to be forced to take a unit activation. And In order to do this, I simply say I'm taking unit activation.